WOWtecture is a 3-week exhibition of international WOW architecture in the open air of the International Sommerfestival at Kampnagel in Hamburg in August 2015. It is designed and curated by the Hamburg artist group Baltic together with the artists and institutions of the Hamburg cultural scene. Baltic is transforming the current construction language of power in the competition of cities in social sculptures and alternative spatial concepts. Architectural insignia from Dubai, Burj Khalifa, Los Angeles, Walt Disney Concert Hall, Frankfurt, European Central Bank, are used as walkable sculptures for the purpose of democratization. The space installation experiments with flexible forms of building, living, working in the city in the sense of the social turn in the current architectural debate. At the same time, WOWtecture offers an international platform for Hamburg's subclub and activism scene and thus strengthens the growing social and cultural capital of the city. In today's competition, modern cities need icons. They are designed to shape the identity of a city, form a landmark, create a striking skyline, and are designed to transform the city into a brand. The phenomenon of upgrading cities with architectural wonders is as old as humanity. Depending on the epoch and location, it is above all religious sites, political buildings, domains. Cultural institutions such as museums or theaters or sports facilities. Private companies, such as banks, shopping centers or hotels, are increasingly building a monument as an exclamation mark. Signature architecture not only demonstrates the power and financial strength of its builders and the technical skills of the engineers, it performs sculptural gestures. Great ships, waves, nests, dancing people and shells, abstracted forms are built into the landscapes. By placing these recognizable images in the cities, they are transforming themselves into the advertising medium of city tourism models. Since attention has been regarded as a currency, the new must radiate, obscure, surpass, but lead itself through the repetition of the gesture ad absurdum. The extraordinary, iconographic special has now become normal. The steel and glass monuments of the globalized world are the same. The third dancing house, the ever higher tallest building in the world, decays to the corporate architecture. The global city tourist is overcome by boredom. Iconographic buildings are at the same time urban metaphors and very concrete fields of life. In addition to city marketing effects, they shape the everyday life of citizens. The buildings of the signature architecture are mostly autistic in nature. They feel no history at the place, committed to the human being. The self-referential, glittering superlatives drudge people and their own environment. Solitary monumental buildings imply a normed code of behavior to its visitors, which urges people to a passive habitus. Impressionism generates artificial power drops. The building uses rather than serves the people. Urban interventions and temporary architecture. The counter-movement to the static image in the skyline is the occupation of spaces between local groups, activists, artists or residents. Urban interventions move between subversive artistic activist tactics, neighborhood initiatives, the capture of the city market, and the power of demonstration through politics itself. They take place everywhere and daily. Subversive interventions by temporary architectures, in the best case, democratize the city and its architecture, demonstrate it differently, use it in an unforeseen way. At a time when urban planning is no longer confined to expansion and growth but has to reflect the options of demolition and shrinkage in the face of demographic change. Alternative forms of construction in the city have to be experimented with. Many artists and architects have been working with the possibilities of temporary architecture for years. According to the trial and error principle, construction processes can always be adapted to the changed needs. The dormant dismantling of buildings allows the options for unusual and not at first sight promising uses to grow. More cost-effective materials allow for higher risks of failure. Reusable material can be used again and is not useless after demolition. Often, in this context, the boundaries between architecture and the liberal arts blend in public space. As a form of subversive urban interventions, temporary architectures are essential for local action spaces because, unlike permanent architecture, they are not normative but always specific. They develop in response to current needs, are flexible and changeable, and thus always one step ahead of the city-specific master plans. While individual services, functions and social strata are pushed out of the centers by the homogenization of the inner cities, above all through cultural policy decisions for a particular city market. Urban interventions such as the BLOCKBAU, the Baltic Raw Tower, the ECO-FAVELA of Baltic Raw create these repressions and at the same time to create a real practical space for the various players. WOWtecture, International WOW. Architecture meets Hamburg subculture. WOWtecture breaks the walls of the great monuments of neo-capitalism and city marketing and opens its doors. WOWtecture is the continuation of the collaboration of Baltic Raw with the International Sommerfestival on Kampnagel, which aims to give the Hamburg subculture and urban activists a meeting and gives them an international platform. The buildings, which were designed and built by Baltic Raw, are handed over to hosts, who in turn design the program during the festival. The Walt Disney Concert Hall, Los Angeles, serves as an arrival center for fugitives, an open, international platform for encounters. A small shop with European Ghanaian products of the eco-favela. A polyphonic sound installation voice recorder with voices of migrants are fixed components. The voice recorder cuts the voices of inhabitants of the Lampedusa tents at the Hamburg main station, the former eco-favela and the central initial reception for asylum seekers to an endless tape. On stage are plays of self-organized theater groups, which take the perspective of the fugitives. There is space for the small world barbecue in the piazza between the buildings. In the Burj Khalifa, Dubai, Rad Propaganda is building a mobile wheel-driven version of the residential house. The space for bicycle culture establishes a meeting place for exchange, theory and practice and empowerment for cyclists. A non-commercial bike production facility, a place of knowledge development, distribution and use for laymen and experts. An independent think tank and meeting point for bicycle culture. Hosts at the European Central Bank, Frankfurt, in the festival Avant-Garten at the Hamburg New Dardaists of JA, who provide 3 weeks of performances and interventions. A central theme is the question of the importance and handling of money in fully globalized processes and economies of our time. The ViewPoint, Hafencity Hamburg, together with students from the University of Fine Arts, is experimenting with new forms of utopian and real fiction and participation models. However, the view of the entire WOWtecture ensemble must be actively promoted. This process visualizes the active search of visitors for an overall picture. But it is never completed, a view platform without a view. WOWtecture is the radical democratization of prestigious buildings and the making of static monuments as a utopian proposal. The closed office complexes, hotels for super-riches and temples of national high culture are opened in the transformation released by reuse. Committed rooms, such as the office, hotel, opera, are transformed into stages for the most varied performances. The utopia of the open, urban and hospitable area is on the Kampnagel site in Hamburg. Sustainable materials, such as multiple-use wood panels, replace steel, glass and concrete, whose massive use, for example, leads to a global environmental disaster caused by maximum sand waste. High-gloss images and eye flatterers are replaced by inviting and pragmatic aesthetics. Static monuments transform into flexible modules and playgrounds. Folk kitchen and kiosk, half-public spaces of exchange and cooperation form a context of closed structural superlatives. WOWtecture does not show the financial and technical capital of the individual, but the cultural capital of many. Occupation, intervention and conversion are not seen as intermediate solutions, but as a source of ideas for a different understanding of life in the city. WOWtecture, on the other hand, expands international iconographic architecture and explores it and, on the other hand, transforms it into action spaces.